Welcome everyone to the roundtable discussion of the film Uprooting Racism and Ceding Sovereignty. We're so excited that you would join us. We have people from all over Phoenix and Tucson especially, which has been so wonderful to see, and even folks from across the United States. So welcome so much to you. We are going to have a really great and interesting conversation tonight. I'm hoping that I offer a few questions that get everybody thinking and get everybody really kind of interested in the way food is happening now. But it's not about me, it's more about our really fantastic panelists that we have tonight. So first of all, I am so honored to introduce a wonderful woman that I met really recently, Bridget Pettis. Bridget is from, next screen, please. Thank you. She's the founder of Project Roots, which is a nonprofit organization here in the Phoenix area. Their aim is to provide and educate the community with access to a community garden. They also have a food bank and mobile soup kitchen. Bridget has also been a member of the WNBA as a player and a coach and executive. Welcome, Bridget. Thank you so much for joining us. I would also like to introduce our next guest will be Darren Chapman. And Darren is a community activist and founder and CEO of the Tiger Mountain Foundation, which is also here in Phoenix and operates out of the spaces of opportunity. He has worked very hard with youth and also adults, promoting healing and active lifestyles and also eating wonderfully. I enjoyed some of his beautiful greens this morning from Tiger Mountain Foundation that I purchased this weekend. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome, Darren. Next is Rodney Machocoto. We're so very lucky to have Rodney in our life. He is an avid farmer. He is a wonderful farmer, and he is a PhD student from ASU. He studies nonprofit organizations, social enterprises, and this doctorate student became a farmer, and we are very, very grateful to him. He is the founder and director of Community Health Improvement Gardens, also here in Phoenix, and often you can find him and his little ones running around at spaces of opportunity, farming the land and making it absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much for joining us, Rodney. We're very, very blessed to have you here and pleased to have you on the panel. And our very special guest tonight is Naima Penniman, and she's joining us from upstate New York. She is the program director at Soulfire Farms. You may have seen her on the video if you watched the movie already. She works with Black and Indigenous farmers on land-based skills, and she also works with them on reclaiming their leadership in the food system. Thank you so much for joining us, Naima. And please, we are very fortunate. She is going to read a poem to start us off, a love note for the future generations.
Amongst such incredible farmers and soil stewards. And I wanted to offer a poem that is part of Invocation, that is the story that this painting also tells. And I painted this to tell the story of my grandma's grandma's grandma, whose name was Susie Boyd, who, like so many women in the Dahomey region of West Africa in the late 1800s, was facing near certain kidnapping and being forced into the bowels of slave ships. And in the face of that terror and uncertainty, had the courageous audacity to gather up the black-eyed pea, the millet, the agusi melon, and other seeds they had saved for generations, and to braid them into each other's hair, believing in a future of life on land and believing that we, their descendants, would exist to carry on that seed. And I believe that all of us are inheriting seeds from our ancestors, and I'll share this poem to depict a little bit more of that story. And happy if you want to take off the screen share during the length of the poem. A flower comes before fruit. Love precedes a child. Someone was dreaming of you. With a womb full of water and seeds and stars, a drum skin stretched over a full moon. One heartbeat becomes two, one seed becomes 100. You are the result of countless love stories and unnumbered feats of overcoming. Can you hear your mother humming you to a sleep while hiding out on escape routes to an implausible freedom you made her believe in? We are descendants of futurists who did not give up on the possibility. Every seed braided into the crown of messengers before uncertain passages, a love note to future generations, a grain of hope somewhere, somehow there would be soil that would open to receive our prayers and multiply. We are descendants of futurists who did not give up on the possibility. At least one seed would survive. The endless tides of transatlantic crossing, auction blocks and razor sharp cotton, monocrop cotton, razor sharp sugar, the harvest of salt, the scalding sun and burning crosses, hidden propagation in forbidden gardens, generations of dehydration and bondage, summoning softness from the clouds. Our bodies are made of water and promise. Our mothers did not give up on the possibility. At least one seed would make its way through layers of cold, hard, rocky silt and sand and clay, and in the face of great danger would soften its shell, open its hull, extend a tender root, find water and food, trusting there is light somewhere enough to bloom. A flower comes before fruit. Love precedes a child. Someone was dreaming of you. Ashe.
Wow, thank you so much. That spoke so deep and really set a wonderful tone tonight for the discussion we're about to have. Thank you so much, Naima Penniman. Very, very grateful to you. In the opening of the film, Uprooting Racism and Seeding Sovereignty, Leah called upon us to think of an ancestor who sacrificed for you. We'd like to take a moment to honor those in our story who planted the seed within us, who inspired and beckoned us to return to the land as caretakers. Please add the name of the ancestor or honored one right there in the chat, please. Someone that is important to you. While everyone is sharing their ancestors' names, we're going to ask our participants to share. Bridget, who is the ancestor who has planted the seed for you? Bridget, you're gonna have to come off mute.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Wow, that was just so powerful, but definitely our ancestors, my great grandmother, just being able to sit at her feet and pick green beans when I was a little girl. That was just a powerful seed that was planted in my soul.
Honors to your great grandmother. Thank you so much for sharing. Darren, who is an ancestor who sacrificed for you?
There's too many, but my great grandfather, Henry Watson, was a slave, and unfortunately what was termed as a breeder slave. And he had 25 sired offspring, one being my grandmother. So what he went through was most inspiring to me because we've come a long way and still yet have quite a ways to go. However, his sacrifice set the stage for the type of work that we do today.
Honors to your great grandfather and your grandmother. Thank you so much, Darren. We appreciate their sacrifice and honor them. Rodney, who is an ancestor who inspired you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. What I'm excited about this question because I recently found a key ancestor who I think it's probably 2 weeks ago. I hadn't realized his story. So my grandfather, his name, we would call him Sekuru Majari. He was my dad's dad. I didn't know this, but he was an amazing grower, right? It turned out he trained my father, and then my father learned so much about growing, including planting trees and so forth. So when I was born, unfortunately, my grandfather was blind, so I'd never witnessed any of the things that he used to do. But what I witnessed was what my father did, right? And so my father got me to grow this and so forth and so on. Even when I didn't like getting in the garden, he got me into all of that. And so now, years later, my grandfather died. My father has died as well, right? And now I'm growing so much. And my mother just told me that your grandfather was such a big grower that trucks, basically villages and villagers would stop in front of his home and buy loads and loads of food. And I'm just realizing the connection that, hey, I am such a grower because my father taught me, because his father taught him. And I didn't know this until 2 weeks ago.
Wow, that's incredible. Your grandfather fed villages.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. We honor your grandfather's work and his inspiration. Naima, who is an ancestor who beckoned to you to return to the land and as a caretaker?
I'm so moved hearing these stories and want to call in my maternal grandmother, Brownie Lee McCullough, who was a daughter of the Great Migration and as a teenager moved from Rock Hill, South Carolina, up to Roxbury in the north, and from red clay soils to pavement. And with her, she brought the memory of growing food. And she's the first person who taught me how to tend soil. My favorite was the strawberry patch that she cultivated behind her house, and also teaching me how to preserve that harvest for the cold winter nights. Having strawberry jam with her is one of my sweet memories. And this is a picture of her holding my cousin.
Wow. Strawberries are a very precious gift for sure. Thank you so much. We honor your grandmother and the gift that she gave us. Thank you for sharing. So really quickly, please, each of you, tell us about your program and what you're doing to feed the Arizona community and those who are most vulnerable. Bridget, we'll start with you.
Wow. Well, we've been very fortunate to, I started with the seed of basketball, and it's just got transformed within a few years to the seed into the earth. And I started at a community garden, and what we started doing was I just started learning on my own. I felt that pull of my own ancestors just leading me in that direction. And it was just so innocently found and discovered. And we started growing food, and I wanted to help others. So that's what we started, was a community garden, and we started feeding the community through it. And so many various things have come out of it: a soup kitchen, our CSA program, just co-opting with other farmers, like with Darren and Rodney as well, and all the farmers that are out at Spaces and Opportunity. We've just been figuring out how to grow food and get it out in our community in the best way. So it's just been such an organic experience and such an educational experience for myself as well. And it's just phenomenal.
Thank you. It is phenomenal.
Thank
And we're very grateful to you and your program. Naima, tell us more about the work that you're doing in New York and how cold it is. Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm in upstate New York at Soulfire Farm, and we're on Mohican territory. And we are farming 80 acres of land. Well, a lot of it is forest, but we have a diversified annual and perennial production of vegetables and fruits and medicinal herbs, as well as poultry and honeybees and Akiko goats here. And we're using Afro-Indigenous regenerative farming practices that have passed down like through our lineages, really reclaiming these ways of cultivating food in relationship with the earth in a way that actually helps to increase biodiversity and return carbon to the soil, as opposed to the destructive ways that industrial agriculture has been really mainstreamed in this country. And so we're reclaiming those practices and growing food to feed those who need it most in our communities. And we box up the harvest every week during our growing season, which is much shorter than Arizona. But we have a bounty of food that we share through what we call our solidarity share programs. And we have a sliding scale so people can pay whatever they can afford down to nothing for this life-giving food. And we make sure it goes first to those who are surviving mass incarceration, who are living under food apartheid conditions, who are refugees, new Americans, or immigrants. And in addition to growing and sharing the food, we also teach other people how to grow food. So we do trainings here on the farm, and we also have a Soulfire in the City program where we support our neighbors in establishing their own home gardens throughout the season.
Wow, that's so much happening there. Thank you so much. Darren, tell us more about your program and Tiger Mountain Foundation.
Yeah, so in all due respect to everyone definitely on this panel, because these are some of the most amazing human beings. We stopped programming when we opened our doors, and we stopped training, and we asked human beings if they would please share your asset, please share your incredible beauty, to come in and put your hands on Mother Earth, and then what we will grow together will be abundant. That cohesiveness is experiential. It's service learning. It's actually show doctors and lawyers and others who typically might not be in your sphere of conversation and your sphere of cultural awareness, how to work with me, how to work with you, and then us building community together. So what we do is in the spirit of that inclusion, that outright diversity, and what that fosters is an equitable way of producing beautiful human beings that are at the table constantly. And that's who we are. And like I say, in all due respect, because things have been entrenched, and words have power. And sometimes for someone to be able to understand me, if I explain it a particular type of way, you might understand it much more clearly. However, hopefully you understood exactly what I just said. We do this from a space that I need to be able to learn from some of the most beautiful human beings that I've ever encountered. And that allows me to grow. That's what we do.
That's incredible. I'm really excited to learn more about cohesiveness and inclusion, the work that you're doing there. in your space, because it is a really, really magical space for sure. And so I thank you so much for transforming it into an absolutely calming, beautiful, and inspirational space. It feels wonderful every time I go to spaces of opportunity. Thank you. Ronnie, I need to hear more. Tell me more. You are working and working and working. So tell me more about your program, please.
All right, thank you. I'm going to start by trying to give a little bit big picture of where I'm coming from. So I've lived on 3 continents, in Africa, Europe, and the United States. So I have a big interest in the global nature of things. And one of the area that I've noticed that allows me to have an impact on the economics, health, as well as the just the food aspect is getting into agriculture. Hopefully, can you hear me well? Okay. Yeah. And so when I came to Arizona, I came here to do a PhD focused on those issues around health and economics, but particularly looking at how agriculture is a key nugget and key entry point that can bring about huge change. So obviously book learning is one thing, but practice. So I was so fortunate to come into a community in Arizona where so many things were happening. So the first thing that started was as we were growing with my wife at our home at 40 by 40, we started working with young people, 10 to 17-year-olds. Most of them were refugees, Asian refugees from the country that just had a coup recently, I think last week, Myanmar. And so most of these need to work on, they had either economic issues or they're trying to assimilate, make friends. So we created a club where they would meet with other races and so forth. And we use gardening and outdoor activities to bring these people together. And a lot of times the gardening projects we got allowed us to fundraise so that we could help fund their opportunities. But as we got other opportunities to grow, we started participating at agave farms and spaces of opportunity that allowed us to, for example, partner with Diana Gregory Outreach Services to grow food that will feed homeless veterans and seniors. We also partnered with Feed Phoenix through what Local First is doing to essentially alleviate some of the families that were struggling because of the COVID situation. We've been working and supplying food to the Arizona Food Bank as well, Food Bank Network as well. So we've had tremendous opportunities. There's so many other opportunities that I could mention, but we really thank organizations like the Orchard Learning Center, as well as the Desert Botanical Gardens and Unlimited Potential and other organizations, Tiger Mountain Foundation, for creating opportunities for us to start engaging and doing some of this work locally.
I think that's a wonderful shout out to Diana Gregory. She is an amazing woman, isn't she?
Yes.
I really love the work that she's doing, and I'm so glad that you're working with her. I mean, she's an integral part of the community that is looking at folks that maybe don't have easy access to fresh vegetables, and she's been this wonderful go-between, the farms and to the shelters. And so thank you so much for mentioning her. I appreciate that. I want to go back to a question that kind of popped up in our chat here, and it's, Naima, we would like to explore something you mentioned, the Afro-Indigenous farming practices. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How are you working through that? How have you learned it? And how are you teaching it? Oh, you're...
Yeah, so there are so many really valuable agrarian practices that we often think of as ahistoric, that are rooted in African agrarian wisdom. And many of the practices that we cherish here are rooted in these traditions or in the diaspora, and also from our indigenous siblings who are native to the land that we're on. So yeah, some that we practice here that I'll mention is like raised beds. All of our beds are raised, and I think many of us use that practice, and that originates from the Ovambo people. Also, rotational grazing and crop rotation is huge, you know, making sure even within a season that we're moving the crops around after harvesting them. Intercropping, heavy mulches, using, you know, muck from the swamp and using that to restore soil health. And I want to shout out Dr. George Washington Carver and Booker T. Watley, founding professors of Tuskegee University, the first ag university in the country, who taught a generation of Black farmers across the South how to heal the land after generations of monocrop cotton production, and using things like mulching and raised beds that are also originated in the continent of Africa. Vermicomposting, composting with worms. Shout out to Cleopatra, who was all about worms. She had a cadre of priests who would dedicated to studying the habits of worms, because she recognized how much they were linked to soil fertility. Also terrace gardening, and also the practices of collective land ownership, collective work models. Like today we're going to all come together and support Brigitte's bed making and planting. And then the next day we're going to go to Rodney's farm and help with him, but like that, the collective kombit, and the ways that we honor the land through ritual and celebration. So those are some, and to speak to the second part of the question of like our process of learning and exchanging, we've been really blessed to build relationships over time with farmers in other places across the country and the world. And that includes in one of my ancestral homelands of Haiti. We've gone every year since 2010 and have an exchange with the farmers. And even though we grow in different climates, it's been powerful, the things that are relevant, like you know, Haiti's very mountainous, and we're also on a mountain. So we shared practices about, you know, preserving the topsoil and doing terraces with the Jardin La Cour model. And we've also been in exchange with the Queen Mothers in Ghana, West Africa, also with farmers in Mexico and in Brazil. And then also with farmers that are of the original peoples who stewarded this land, and that's the Mohican, specifically the Stockbridge Muncie Mohican band. And they now live in Wisconsin. They were forcibly displaced hundreds of years ago, late 1800s. And we've been able to develop a relationship with them and do a seed exchange. And so we plant here the original Muncie corn and bean seeds, and have learned the way that they prepare like their beds and do that planting through the seed keepers of that nation. And so, you know, every year the seed harvest gets bigger and bigger, and we're able to share that back with them. So a lot of exchange of knowledge, and we're really dedicated to, you know, being able to pass that on to a returning generation of Black and Indigenous farmers who are healing their relationship with land.
That's wonderful. Do you feel then that the raised beds give you an opportunity to heal the soil underneath as it kind of works its way down?
Yeah, the raised beds is a really wonderful way to preserve all the microbes and mycelium and nutrients that are working in the soil without heavy tillage that can disrupt that cycle. And so, you know, we mound our soil in these beds, which also allows like more moisture retention, and you know, also helps not have as many weeds. And so it's effective for like our labor as well. And it's a way that we're able to farm at scale where we can use, you know, our hands and our tools, and not relying on, you know, plowing, which disrupts the health of the soil, and also the balance of the carbon in the atmosphere and in the soil. So those are some of the benefits.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. So I do want to ask you another question, Naima. What in the movie that we watched, Leah brings up land reparations.
Mhm.
What is Soul Fire Farm approach on reparations?
Yeah, reparations um, is really important part of how we address decades of land theft, theft of labor, and also decades of discrimination by the federal government. You know, the USDA through discriminatory lending has caused Black farmers to lose almost all of our land. We went from a peak of Black land ownership of 14% of the farmland to now only 1%, right? It's more racially skewed than ever before, with 99% of rural farmable land being in the hands of the descendants of European colonists. And it's not because Black folks don't know how to farm, don't want to farm. It's because of this ongoing systemic racism and racial terror that has forced us off of the land. And so reparations for past harm is one step towards justice, wherever possible, land and wealth being redistributed to descendants of those for whom it was stolen. And some of those steps would be to pass the bill HR 40, which would establish a commission to study reparations. And this would be for African Americans, Black Americans, and create a debt forgiveness program for farmers who have been affected by discrimination. And then also halting and reversing the grabbing of land from tribal nations, such as we've seen at Standing Rock and Bears Ears. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for the government to catch up and institute wholesale reparations, what Soulfire and others are doing is really figuring out people-to-people reparations. And we have an initiative in collaboration with the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust we've created a reparations map, which helps to match Black and Indigenous-led land-based projects who are in need of land, tractors, resources, funding, with those who are descendants of inherited generational wealth, who have the opportunity to voluntarily give the resources that are being asked for. There's also a national effort that's being coordinated by the National Black Food and Justice Alliance that I can share in the chat. And this is really powerful, to be able to take it into our own hands, right? To be able to, find those matches of people-to-people solidarity and go ahead and, give what is due. Because as we know, 40 acres and a mule was a broken promise, and there's never been wholesale restitution or redistribution. And we've only seen widening racial wealth disparities having to do with our relationship to land.
I appreciate that. And yes, please share the links with us. We definitely want to continue this conversation. This is just the beginning. Thank you so much. Darren, I want to ask you, what concerns do you have about land reparation?
I think my biggest concern would be that, and Naima hit it right on the nose. So the opportunity on the land needs to be taken advantage of, literally. I mean, literally take advantage of, or else what could happen is you could receive the land and then from that same systemic purview, within a year and a half to 2 years, you're in danger of losing the land back to that same system. So your exit strategy and or your continuity strategy needs to be intact. So I'm not so sure it's a concern. I think for me, listening to Naima and knowing Bridget and Rodney and how they grow, I'm comfortable knowing that at least within this group, some really nutritious narrative, healthy for the soul, healthy for the community, will come out of that land. However, if we're doing it right, we're taking 40 acres and making it exponential into 400, 4,000, and so on. So with it being that way, I think for me, finally, once again, utilizing some really sound social enterprise, not capitalism, but social enterprise. How could this be relative to a person who might need to check a box before he can actually go into the workforce? Now he's part of a village that is working on this land in a multitude of different ways that bring regeneration back to the economics of that land. So the mass consumerism that we typically might see, at least in the neighborhoods where I grew up, socioeconomically, quote unquote, low income, right, are now the places that are grasping these opportunities with the same consumerism. However, the thought process and the exit strategy is towards our better welfare as opposed to just existing, because we know that on now those same blocks there are so many things and places to go and things to do that have not led to our betterment. So looking for that finality, if not that continuity in the exit strategy that leads to longer term betterment of those same folks who are part of the mass consumerism, part of the narrative that went far to one side as opposed to um, somewhere where it could actually be very healthy for the community as a whole.
I got you. I understand. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Bridget, I want to ask you, what do land reparations mean to you?
Um, it's the future. It's having an opportunity to be re-educated and utilize you having, I look at the tool of basketball and that's just was my journey for almost 49 years. And we capitalized on this and now land, what we could do with it and just the education of it, just knowing the true value of it. My focus is to educate and bring us back to an understanding of the importance of the land, and then we'll know the right things to do with the land.
I love that.
Because reparation is definitely, it's time. It's definitely time.
And I love the importance of understanding and learning and working through it together. So thank you very much for sharing. And Rodney, you have some firsthand experience in witnessing land reparation already. Can you give us a little bit more information about how you have seen a government implement land reparations firsthand?
Sorry, I got to unmute first. Yeah. So just wanted to, I'll give you a little quick background. Zimbabwe, where I come from, was under the British, it was a British colony from the 1800s, and it got its independence in 1980. When a number of its neighbors, most of them got their independence in the 1960s. The big issue with Zimbabwe that dragged the process out was the issue of land, right, which is a relevant topic for us today. Right, and particularly Zimbabwe is a really rich country. It's got a climate that is very right in the middle, not too hot, not too cold. Some of you may not believe it, but I felt I've never been as hot as I've been in Arizona. In Zimbabwe, it's not that hot, right? But what happened in 1980 was that the British government and the Zimbabwean government, the new black government, agreed that there will be a willing buyer, willing seller, where basically there'll be a reparation program where the farmers who were sort of descendants of colonialists would give the land back to the blacks. But that process dragged on until in the 2000s. So between 2000 and maybe like 2015, the government, Zimbabwean government, predominantly black government, fast-tracked that process, right? And there was a significant backlash from the international community in terms of what some of the things that happened. And one of the things that I'll mention that is something that I hope everybody stays aware of is that as a former auditor, I know there's the corrupting influence of power and money. It knows no boundaries, knows no race, knows no anything, right? And a lot of times when we implement these programs, some individuals take advantage of the process and try to enrich themselves. So we had a lot of politicians who enrich themselves, and a lot of business people with connections would enrich themselves, whereas they were doing the process to enrich the masses, and a lot of the masses were left without land. Or when they got the land, Darren's point that he talked about came alive, right? So basically, the land was taken back from them by other black folks because they didn't do much with it, right? But to me, the biggest the thing that made me sad the most is what has happened even for those people who have access, which is one that I hope we would think about, was that whilst a lot of people got the land, whether they got it easily or with difficulty, once they got it the land, the issue that I think Darren talked about, that continuity, what happened was there has been a significant number of people who got it who got somehow disinterested in farming, disinterested in land, to the point they don't care whether it's going to be Chinese or Indians or British or Americans. Anybody who's going to come, they'll give them the land, right? Because they, for some reason, psychologically, the idea of connecting to the land for the new generation became unimportant, right? And so therefore they don't care about it. They want to get rid of it. And to the point that for me, who I'm in the United States, I have a bachelor's in accounting and master's in accounting. I used to audit large corporations, including General Electric and Coca-Cola, these major corporations. Now I'm doing a PhD. I have faced a big backlash from my family, big backlash from my friends, and big backlash for even the Zimbabweans in the United States. And the whole point was, why are you wasting time engaging in farming, right? It's a waste of time. You need to go and find a job in an office and blah, 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 right? And I study world economies. I study world systems. I follow organizations like the World Economic Forum. Anybody who's aware of these issues, food is a current and a future issue. So anybody who has connection to the land has a valuable resource, but it's very difficult to communicate that. And it's going to be part, I think Bridget used the word that I'm going to steal from her. I don't know how we're going to do it, but education is going to be key, right? Because if we're going to have any continuity with any reparation issue, and we're going to avoid what Darren and Naima talked about, some of the things that we may face in terms of the possible failures, we have to educate, particularly empower those individuals who may get this land, particularly the new generations. So that's what I want to share.
I completely agree with that, Rodney. Thank you so much. Education, I think we're all on board that education is extremely important in order to make sure that there's a future of food and a future of farming, especially in Arizona that has an abundance of sunshine, a really long, wonderful growing season. But to the point of one of our attendees put, land without water is tough to farm. So I want to ask you then, Rodney, how are we going to save water rights? And how can we ensure that we can have continuing water in Arizona? Do you see an end to the lack of water or the draw from large corporations to have water to feed like alfalfa or for other, or for golf courses, or for places that maybe, could get different water or didn't have water issues that we're seeing that the farms really need?
Wow, this is a tough one. I hope I'm going to do the best I can. I was reading an article I have some friends who have been trying to purchase land in Wilcox, right? And I was just researching on it, and I came across an article about how most of the people in Wilcox, very good land, good climate, a lot of the people who own land there, their wells are running dry because a number of major businesses, particularly cattle ranchers from the Midwest, have come in, I think, establishing 70,000 cattle farms and so forth, and they're drilling way, way deep, right? And so It's wiping out a lot of the water. And I've noticed, especially coming from Zimbabwe, where we don't need to irrigate. That was a big learning curve for me, right? It just rains, right? And so for Arizona, this has been a tough one. I know went through the Cape, I think it's called the Central Arizona Project. They gave us a little bit detail. And I would just share with, yeah, I don't have a good answer, but I'll just share with you what they shared with us was that particularly for the rest of the country, water may be a major issue. But what they indicated was that most of the water that's coming to Arizona is coming through the Colorado River as snow melt coming down and just flowing here, right? And they seem to be an assurance from what they were saying and some of the things that I was reflecting on that whilst a lot of other places we may find difficulties in water, if we continue seeing these really, really drastic cold spells that bring large volumes of snow to places like Colorado or those places, it seems like the situation with water, at least in Arizona, well, at least part of Arizona where at least the Central Arizona Project comes through, we may have a future that we may have an opportunity that other places may not have because particularly some of the people that I've talked about who know more about this topics around global warming is that a lot of this will create really drastic winters, right? And so if there's drastic winters up north and that snow melts down, it's going to enter in that Central Arizona canal system and end up feeding the Phoenix and Tucson areas. That the water is a tough one. So I think that is the best I can give. I at least that gave me hope. And if it turns out like that, at least for us who are in Arizona, we may have to call Naima to come and join us down here if she has trouble. But it was a little sense of hope. But that one, hopefully my other panelists have a better take on that because it's a tough question. Yeah, it's a tough question.
So I want to ask you, Darren, as you see spaces of opportunity go and evolve and change and shift, and I know that you guys have a wonderful irrigation system there. Tell us more about how water is working for or against you as spaces of opportunity.
Well, with water, for what it's supposed to do, works for us tremendously because we practice the most efficient way of delivering it to the land. So we're using angles based on planes, based on gravity. This is a science, technology, engineering, and arts that were practiced by the griots of our ancestry on how to deliver water into space. So we're doing the most efficient thing that we can in regards to water. Water is I got to tell you, it's just a sore subject with me because we use it inefficiently and we just haven't valued our environment to the extent that it could be around we want it to be around for 10, 15, 20 years. However, we haven't valued our environment to the extent so that it could be around, should be around. You know what, dare I say, would even want to be around? I don't even know if I want to be water around some of these people the way y'all treat me. If I was water, that's how I talk to folks. I'm just saying, B, I'd be mad at folks, man. Y'all treat me like this. You let me evaporate. You don't harvest me, right? You don't take what Rodney talked about, which, by the way, that was so eloquently put by the great doctor. Man, my brother, water is such a crucial life force. It's 80+% of our body. It's our everything in our elements, and environmentally we've just haven't really given it the proper respect that it needs. And so we're at at spaces of opportunity, we're utilizing it as most efficiently as we can. We need to take better care of water and some of the alternatives of how we use water so that it could be used less. However, to its highest degree at its lesser amount.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. Water is life, and we need it to survive. Bridget, I want to ask you about some of the education programs that you're doing and the possibility of how you may have seen system change through education. How have you been able to leverage your knowledge that you have and your teaching ability and connections in order to change the food system and make it different? And you're on mute.
Sorry. Being somewhat of a face in Phoenix, it's been a blessing. At first, I didn't really know what to do with this. Like, all right, people know what I've done. And I'm using this now to understanding to draw them to the land. Come to the land. This is where we need to be. And I think that's how we're educating our community, by hands-on, coming back, getting back connected into the soil. Something that Sister Namima has said about rituals and celebration. I think that is like the key to what we're really trying to get to, is getting back rooted, and it can solve us understanding how valuable just Mother Earth is in herself. And that's how we've been educating our community, is hands-on, getting our hands back into it and seeing the fruit of that come out, seeing the food that we produce and eating that food, putting that food into our body. As like I said, as someone who used their body daily to perform, it became so clear to me that what food is and what food isn't. And the land carries the future. And that's the way we've been educating people, is to get back to the land.
That's fantastic. That's it comes back to the land, it comes back to us getting our hands dirty, right? So, okay, I want to be very respectful. We have more questions, but I want to be very respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to actually wrap it up here. And I really want to thank you all. Thank you so much, Rodney, for joining us. Thank you, Darren and Tiger Mountain Foundation, for the work that you're doing there. I do want to say that I realized we were planting trees earlier today. So I hope that the trees do wonders towards helping our heat canopy and maybe inviting the rain to come back in and join us here in Arizona. Thank you so much, Bridget. We really appreciate the work that you're doing with Project Roots and Project Soup. Both are very important programs. And thank you so much to our special guest and honored guest, Naima Penniman. And thank you so much to Soulfire Farm. You have been a wonderful inspiration to us, to all of us. And we're very, very grateful to you. Thank you so much for that. I'd also like to thank Melissa so much for helping us with the technical portion of this and getting everything set up. I'd like to thank Kimber Lanning, our founder of Local First Arizona, for having the genius to see behind this crazy film series and supporting us all along. And I'd like to thank my colleague, Somlin Rory. Somlin's gonna come on board here and she's gonna tell us all about what comes up next, because there's more to come.
Again, I want to echo Tanya's sentiment. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Naima. Thank you, Rodney, for sharing your words, for opening your heart, for imparting this wisdom that will inspire us and hopefully the generations and the curiosity of those who are looking to get closer and connected and to heal themselves and to heal the land. I wanted to share a little bit about this upcoming Good Food film series. Each month, Local First Arizona will be presenting a new film that spotlights some of the societal challenges that are facing the farming and food community across Arizona. These are stories of the often unseen heroes doing the good work of not only growing and providing healthy, fresh food to our communities, but also taking those bold environmental and sovereignty steps to create a more sustainable and just food system. And we hope that you will join us and participate in our film series. And you can learn more about it at our website, goodfoodfinderaz.com. Again, thank you all for coming, and I'm gonna turn it back to Tanya for closing thoughts.
Thank you very much. I invite you all to, if you have a moment, please, as we leave, go outside and touch the ground and just feel the beauty of the earth. Just love it. Thank you very much. We hope to see you in March for the first and upcoming March film series, The State of Farmland in Arizona. Thank you.